Thank you for joining us here for the second part of our series on the miraculous and the mysterious in Judaism. I want to again thank Project Inspire for hosting this. It's always a privilege to be part of their holy work. There's no one like Project Inspire. And it's always a great crowd who comes to listen to the shiur. So let's start. The last shiur that we did was on the miracles. We explained miracles. We gave basically three explanations for the role of miracles in Judaism. And in this class, we're going to deal with the mysterious. There's a lot of ways to go about talking about the mysterious in the Torah. I'm going to focus on the laws that are mysterious. People are aware that the laws of the Torah fall into two main categories, maybe possibly three categories, primarily hukum and mishpatim. They're commonly translated as hukum are like mishpatim first. Mishpatim are like the rational laws, laws like don't steal and don't lie and honesty and don't murder. All the laws of society, a civil society, laws of justice and kindness and compassion, and those laws are rational, understandable, and it's commonly understood that hukum are the laws that require some measure of faith. They're not understood, not that they don't have meaning, but that they're beyond our ability to grasp. And it's understood somehow. People normally talk about them, at least when I went to school when I was younger, the way it was explained is that you're demonstrating some kind of deep trust in God to follow things even when you don't understand them. I want to give a little more, shed a little more light on hukum than that we learned if you learned about these things when you were younger, and to probe a little deeper. It's definitely appropriate that there would be laws in the Torah that would require some kind of suspension of self, a demonstration of trust. Trust is a big part of life, and the Torah should definitely want to train you in that. But you wouldn't need a whole body of laws if they're all the same. If we don't know the reasons and we can't know the reasons, so why do we need so many hukum? Why would there need to be a varied amount of laws like that? All the nuance and subtlety is lost on us. So, and there are many reasons to go into explaining the hukum. And so this is what I want to really get into today. There are a bunch of hukum that are commonly known. We definitely in this short class, we're not going to be able to touch on all of them. I think, the most intriguing of the hukum probably is shatnez. Those who know the law, that you're not allowed to wear garments with a combination of wool and linen. It's a fascinating idea, something, people never even think about these kind of things, and I want to get into explaining the shatnez. Also, the Torah refers to the chok of all hukum. The greatest chok is the law of the red heifer. Zois chukas haTorah. This is the chok of the Torah. So I want to explain maybe the red heifer a little bit, and again, I'm not explaining it. I'm not going to, who am I? But I'm going to shed light on that I've learned, that I know, and give a little bit of insight into these laws. Also, there are things that people know about, depending on your background, that definitely create a lot of curiosity. Like, I think it'll be worth talking about what the mitzvah of peyos are, why we have these, Hasidim wear these side locks, and that's something, just a user-friendly thing to get into. It might not be the most important chok to probe, but I think understand it's such a visual part of Judaism. I know when I used to take students on Israel trips, so a lot of them, many of them, was their first time in Israel. Even the ones who wasn't the first time, we would take them like to places they never saw before. We would go to Mea Shearim, So I'd be on the bus with the mic, sort of like a tour guide. And I of course, you have to explain the garb and the payas, and so I knew that people were it was very edifying. The people enjoy getting a little bit of an insight and the clarity because the things we do in Judaism aren't random or insignificant. We do things because they're important, and it's a paradigm shift to look at the world through the eyes of the Torah's requirements. Now, there's a great amount, most of the hukum really deal with the laws of kashrus. Why we don't eat pig, or why we don't eat meat and milk, laws of kosher wine and blood and fats. That it deserves its own class. Maybe if we have time in the end, I'll stick in a few ideas. But I think we'll leave the kosher hukum for another class. One day we'll do a class on on the mysteries of kashrus and, the symbol, what the Torah wants, the signs of kosher animals, a fish, if it has fins and scales, an animal is kosher, if it has split hooves and shoes, it's cod. So these aren't just things to ignore. Like, what does the Torah want? What does it mean to chew a cud? What is a split hoof? What is fins and scales? Why should that affect, we tend to look at the world exclusively through perspectives of health. I'll talk about that more later, but that's a very, very shallow, very not sophisticated view. Life is far more sophisticated, deep, and nuanced than just matters of health. And hukum become more clear as we expand, use modern terminology, as we expand our consciousness to, then all of a sudden, different sensitivities, different laws will leap into focus. It'll become understanding. Okay, understandable. Let's go further. Okay, so I just want to start off first with the word chok. I think it's important to define the word, and that will go a long way into giving us clarity as to what exactly hukum are attempting to accomplish. The word chok is a word in the Torah. It means to chisel. The luchot, the tablets, were chakukim. They were chiseled. If you visualize the act of chiseling, what it is you're creating writing or a form, but not by creating the form, it's by removing the filler, right? If you'd visualize the tablets, the words, I am the Lord your God, thou shalt not, all those laws, they were chiseled through the stone, a hole in the stone. It was like a stencil. So the words existed, Anochi Hashem, I am the Lord your God, but they didn't have like a physical, well, that's really what I wanted to point out. Think about this for a second. If you're reading a tablet that was carved, chiseled, you're reading it. So how would you describe the existence of the words that you're reading? What are you reading, right? The stencil. A stencil is a paper with a hole, and you fill in the letters, A, B, C, whatever, right? So when you're reading a stencil, I would call that chiseled. I mean, it's not actually chiseled there, it's just hole punched. But when it's stone, the way you create a stencil out of stone is you have to chisel it. So, chakukim, the act of chakika. So, when you chisel, what is the act of chisel? What are the words that result from chiseling? What's their existence? Right? The idea is they don't have physical existence. But the words, they do exist, right? There is a word, I am the Lord your God. You can read it, but it's made out of vacuum. So there are two types of writing. There's writing where you have white parchment or paper, and you write on it. The words have actual existence. Black ink on top of white background. But there's another form of writing which is the reverse, or an inverse. It's a hole through the white. The words exist. See, that's what chukim and mishpatim both are real. They have real ramifications and real applications to understanding. The difference is that chukim are lacking physical, material existence. The message of the words is intact. The ideas contained in them, the vehicle of conveying it doesn't have matter for. It's not a matter existence. Meaning, if the law of wool and linen was a mishpat kind of law, a justice kind of law, right? Then it would be that it gives you a rash, and the wool and linen disintegrates quickly, and you're going to losing money by buying wool and linen. It would be some kind of practical, tangible, material law. Chukim, though, don't have material existence. They're laws that again, as far as understanding and meaning and purpose and insight, they're identical. It just doesn't have physical meaning. So we're going to find that the chukim, you can't judge them by what implication they have on life. It's not going to make you sick to eat meat and milk. Then it would be called a mishpat. It would be the regular kind of writing. The fact that it's called chiseled means it doesn't have a matter meaning. It doesn't have matter meaning, but it has theoretical meaning. And we're going to find that why would there be laws without matter meaning? And essentially the laws of chukim are far more essential. These are the global understandings that Judaism delivers without being colored or limited by any practical concern. These are abstract understandings that are integral to life. Without studying the hukum, we're going to miss out on a huge amount of life, maybe some of the most important concepts of life. Because Hashem's choice to communicate these laws as hukum means he didn't want us to be distracted by their practical ideas. These are sort of truth before it hits earth. Truth in its global understanding before we get into the nitty-gritty of practical applications. That's my introduction to what a hukum are. And now we can go into actual studying a few of the hukum. Okay, so I think the best one to start, the best chok to start with is probably shatnez, wool and linen. That's the one we introduce first, and it's appropriate to use that first. It's a good introduction to hukum. It's the prototypical, not understandable, beyond us law. To get into the wool and linen, we really have to start off really like everything in the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve, well, really as they get thrown out. Adam and Eve are thrown out of the Garden of Eden because they sin. And then we get introduced to the next generation. I call it take two at the world. I like to see the Torah as like sort of this epic, novel, this movie it's the perfection, mankind's search for greatness, mankind's attempt to become godly. So take one was Adam, that didn't end as well as we would have liked. So Cain and Abel are take two. And then the whole history of the Torah are all the slow process of mankind finding his way towards the will of Hashem, towards godliness, perfection, happiness, joy. They're all synonyms, really, if you think about it. But that's not for now. So this is what we need to know. The process of sin and trying again needs that something changes every time. Meaning, if Adam and Eve fail, so then why should take two be different than take one? Like, why should Cain and Abel be different than Adam and Eve? They tried and they failed. So what happens is at each stage in the Torah, there's one change. And the best metaphor is like if I have a kid and I want my kid to eat an apple. He's a little kid, he can't eat an apple. So we cut the apple up into little pieces and in 5 minutes it's gone. Because now it's bite size. Each piece the kid can deal with. It's within his ability to eat pieces, not a whole apple. And Adam and Eve were given, pardon the pun, the apple to eat, right? They were given an apple, not to eat. But in my metaphor, that was they had the job of becoming godly, perfection. In one whole thing, one law that embodied all of human challenges. When Adam and Eve fail, so then God divides the job in half. And now Cain and Abel are each of half of reality, half of the universe. And then we'll see afterwards, you have the flood, and after the flood, there are three people, Shem, Cham, and Yafes. They re-inhabit the earth, and each one of them is 33% of life. Eventually you end up with 12 tribes, each one 1/12, 70 nations, 600,000 people. The process of life is to keep on dividing the job into smaller and smaller slices. Of course the job is still godliness and perfection, or happiness, completion. But each individual has a specialty and a niche role, and that's how the job essentially becomes easier because now you have bite-sized pieces. So what we need to study now is, stage one is easy to understand. It's called becoming perfect. Once we start dividing the job into slices, it gets more complex. Like, how do you divide the job of perfection in half? How do we give Cain and Abel each 50% of humanity's job? This way, if he does his part and he does his part, then basically the job is done, and Adam's job is complete, having been divided in half. So how do we understand that? How would you divide the job in half? So the secret to understanding things in the Torah, everyone in the Torah, their name defines them. It's sort of like a caricature of the person. To understand Cain and Abel, Cain and Hevel, you have to know what their names mean. The names mean as follows. Cain's name means acquisition, and Abel's name means, it's like the first words of Kohelet, of Ecclesiastes. Havel havolim hakoil hevel. Vanity of vanity, all is vanity. Nothingness. Hevel means harir. Cain is acquisition. The two names of Adam's children. Fascinating, cute names, no? Vanity and acquisition. What book did they pick those out of? But vanity and acquisition are the two kids. What does that mean? There are two halves of life. Hevel's philosophy, Abel's philosophy, is vanity of vanity, all is vanity. Look at this world. What are you busy with this world? It's a fleeting world. It's finite. It lasts for about moments. You're going to die. You can't take anything with you. Just go to the top of a mountain and talk to God. Become an ascetic and a hermit, and it's all vanity. His entire life is the idea that this world is just it's just a temptation. It's just at best, it's a distraction. There's God, and just deal with God. Don't be involved with the physical world. Do whatever you got to do minimally to make a living, and to eat and to survive. But to be involved, to pursue things, it's all vanity. Cain says exactly the opposite. He goes, Abel, what are you talking about? Yes, I agree with you that we want to only know God, but we don't know anything of God. The only thing we know of God is the universe that He created. That's all we have, pre-Torah, right? Then now we have two things to study. We have the world and Torah, but at that time, all they had was the universe. So how are you going to know God? By escaping the world. The only way you can know God is to experience every single nuance of the world. You got to expand, and instead of contracting and going on top of a mountain, you have to stretch your arms as far as they go and embrace as much of the universe. Abel is the escapist. I call him the idealist, idealism. And Cain is the realist. He lives in the real world. His name is acquisition. His approach to God is to acquire, and Abel's approach to God is to escape. And each one of them is 50% of the world. There's truth to either one. Each one is missing the truth of the other. And perfection would be if Cain would become the total embracer of the beauty of God in the world, and Abel, the man who totally escaped and was totally holy and pure. And together they would achieve totality. Each one now sets out, their life becomes a caricature of these ideas. Abel wants to escape life. He doesn't want to be involved in the physical life. He becomes a shepherd. In the Torah, the shepherd is the metaphor, the symbol for the ascetic. You have to do something, but what does he do? He's busy with, first of all, sheep themselves they're the most ethereal thing in the world. They're white, they're fluffy, they don't work. The purpose of a sheep is it grows wool. It happens on its own, the soft, fluffy, pure whiteness of the wool. It's a poetic image of purity, is the whiteness of wool. And he allows, and even the shepherd's job is to allow the sheep to graze. Throughout the Torah, shepherds are spoken about. The imagery and the metaphor of a shepherd is this calm, serene, non-involved in the rat race of life. It's the ascetic, maybe writing a little poetry and talking to Hashem and saying Tehillim on the top of a mountain with his passive sheep. Cain, though, is the opposite. Cain says, "You're not escaping life." So he becomes the farmer. The farmer is the man who struggles with the earth, pulling holiness out of the earth. He's out. Don't escape life. I can show how the most mundane physical thing is holy. You don't need to go up there for holiness. The idea is I can find holiness in anything. Abel's greatest achievement would be total escape. Cain's greatest achievement would be to find God in the lowest thing in the world. So each of their lives is seen as an offering. It says that Abel brings of his sheep, the best of his sheep, and Cain brings weak vegetables, from his vegetables, but the poorer ones. So what does that mean? What it means is, I don't know, it's literally an offering, or it's a metaphor of their lives were offerings, or probably both. It's probably true on the literal and the larger, conceptual level. Their life was an offering to Hashem. Abel's whole life of shepherding was offering to Hashem. His offering that he actually brings on the altar is the best of the sheep. If you wanted to serve God with something ethereal, something non-worldly, what would be the symbol of non-worldliness? The best of the sheep. Best in his sense, in Abel's sense, is escape, is non-worldliness. So it doesn't mean the best sheep. What he put on his altar was wool. The best of the sheep is the wool. It's the most passive thing in the universe. It happened on its own. It's white. It's ethereal. It's otherworldly. Cain, though, is the opposite. He wants to show, I can find God. It's easy to find God in Yerushalayim. I'm going to find God in Vegas. I'm going to go find the most coarse, crass thing in the world and show how that deserves to be on the altar too. So the farmer who's penetrating the earth and working on the earth and toiling on the earth, what is the most crass, coarse crop that he could put on the altar? He wants to serve God not with something ethereal. What's the opposite of that? The most material thing in the world. So anything edible already is holy. It already has some kind of life to it. The symbol in the Torah for the most coarse produce is linen, is hemp. It's used just for burlap sacks. It's strong, colorless, coarse, rough. It's used for rope and sacks. It's not, you don't eat it. These are the polar understandings of the polar ends of the understandings of the world. Abel serves God metaphorically and literally with the wool of his sheep, and Cain serves God literally and metaphorically with the linen, with the coarsest of his crops. And they both offer their offerings to God. Two ways to serve God: escaping the world and harnessing the world. And together that would have been perfection. The idealist and the realist. Unfortunately, it didn't turn out like that. That's not the context of this class, what happened and what went wrong. But Cain kills Abel. And that means, in the larger sense, that idealism and realism have never joined together. We never succeeded at perfecting the world in that sense. And that blemish is the blemish that still exists. The sin of Adam and Eve still exists, and the second blemish of mankind is the gap between idealism and realism, the practical and the theoretical. The argument of Cain and Abel remains unresolved. And we believe that every single division in the world, every fight that has ever existed in the universe since then, has its roots in the unresolved argument of Cain and Abel. If you've ever been in a fight with somebody, one person was more theoretical and one was being more practical. One was a philosopher and one was a realist. Idealism and realism. Every argument is the argument of Cain and Abel. The symbol of the flaw in the world is the separation of the wool and the linen. The idea of a strand of wool and linen, that is the Jewish image of perfection, where idealism and realism meet and they become whole. That is holiness. Holiness is wool and linen. But wool, we don't deserve it. It wasn't achieved. We live in a world of strife and division and theorists, people who live in that world. People who live in the real world. And these are missing the animation and the joy and the sparkle in the eye that comes from understanding. And those guys are missing the practical acts, the grasp on what is that comes with being practical. A world needs to be like in Jacob's dream, a sulam mutzav arza, a ladder planted firmly on the earth, but its head reaching the heavens. You have to have your head in the heavens, and your feet on the ground. That is what God wanted. And it's Yaakov who's the first one to toil with the image of that dream. And the bridging, you have to be really, really tall to have your head in heaven, to have your head in the heavens and your feet on the ground. And therefore we don't wear wool and linen. This is the blemish on mankind. We're not entitled to wool and linen. In the days of Mashiach, there'll be wool and linen. The Kohen Gadol, the high priest, only in the temple wore wool and linen, and only the special garments of the Kohen Gadol. And in the world to come, it's a world of wool and linen. What the Torah is saying is that idealism and realism, that's perfection. It's very, very real. These are hukum, these are laws without reason. These are the laws that lie in the underpinnings of the entire universe. The universe is nonsensical and empty without the hukum. They just don't have, it doesn't have material meaning. It's chiseled into reality. Listen, this idea may give you a little insight into on the ways to understand the idea of chiseled, sort of like permanent in the bedrock of the insides of what defines reality, as opposed to the external manifestations of reality. Okay, but also when you chisel, you're chiseling, but you're forming the world, and somehow these flaws of the flaws, the damage of Cain and Abel has sort of shaped the world in the same sense that chiseling creates letters and texts. So a lot of ways to understand it. Just like anything in Torah. The goal is just to start you off, and then that's what we do. Kol yemei chaya, all the days of our lives, to toil in Torah and to probe deeper and see greater and more beautiful and deeper things. Okay, let's do the next chok. The next chok, we'll do I think the para aduma, the red heifer. That's considered the classic chok. You know what? Let me add in one thing. People ask this question all the time, and I think we might have time. So I don't think we'll be derailed, or the class will be negatively affected to discuss this. Is if this is true that Abel brought his offering because he was trying to use the wool, escaping life, and Cain brought his lowly vegetables because that was the point, to serve God with coarse, not holy things, to show I can find God anywhere. And that was a holy achievement. So why did God accept Abel's offering and not Cain's? Right? We know the fire came from Shemayim. The fire came onto the altar and ate. That's what the verse says, and ate up Abel's offering, and that's why Cain was jealous. Cain was jealous because he didn't get the response that Abel got. But if we're describing both of them here as noble, and the flaw was only their ability to get together, which I'll say this too, is that, you see, when in stage one, when it was only Adam, all Adam had to do is perfect the job. He was one person. The job would be perfect. Once the job is divided, now it gets more complex. Because when the job is divided, then there's an extra job. Not only does Cain have to do his job and Abel have to do his job. You need a realist and an idealist. They have nothing in common. There is no union. There is no overlap of their characters. They're literally a slice, clean cut. What Cain and Abel were supposed to do is Cain and Abel were supposed to live long enough independently until the third son of Adam would have been born, Shais. And Seth, Shais would have been the unifier. The third one, his job would have been to unify Cain and Hevel into one. He would have been the union synthesizer. But unfortunately, when Shais was born, Abel was already dead and Cain was already banished. And it was over. It was too late. So this is the nature of the world now, is that everyone, since in the world of specialty and division, each one of us has to work on our niche job. And then there needs to be, I think I mentioned in the last class, the job of, or a different class, the job of the conductor, somebody who then can take all the diverse parts. One of the roles of life is the role of conductor. Like everyone has an instrument, the conductor has a job, is not to play an instrument. The conductor doesn't play it. The conductor doesn't play an instrument. He unifies the other instruments. So that's what happened with Cain and Abel, and that's what's supposed to happen with Shem, Cham, and Yafes after the flood. And that didn't happen either. Shem perfected his role, right? Shem is the intellect. If you divide the world into three, it's a whole different trip. Dividing the world into three would be, Shem is the intellect, the definer of things, the namer, Shem. Cham is passions, heat, and Yafes is beauty, is the physical. Dividing the world into 33.3% thirds, three different jobs, is different than idealism, realism. There it's emotion, intellect, and action. And they were supposed to coexist until the fourth son of Noach would have been born. But that never happened because of whatever happened when Noach got drunk and Cham did something to him. That's the real story there, was preventing the fourth son. The same problem happens, that there is no unity between the three of them. And that's why we're still here. The job hasn't been done yet. All right, so what I wanted to add is, so why did, I'm just keep on going new places, but why did Shem, and why did Cain not get the fire? So I think it's deep. It's that Cain didn't get the fire. It's not a punishment. That's the nature of the two jobs. The person who lives escaping the world and dealing with God, the meditative person, the person in the world of Psalms talking to God, so he lives like with his life is permeated by godliness. He feels it. There's always organ music in the background of his life and like fluttery sounds. Like Cain is the farmer. His job is to find God in the darkness. So his job is to persevere in the darkness. It's not that God rejected his sacrifice. Is that his sacrifice doesn't get instant feedback. That's a different path to God. It's the trip to God to toil in darkness and to find God and create your own light and your own purpose and to keep your eye on the ball. You don't live in that, soft, magical, tiptoeing, fluttery world of Hevel, of Abel. And then the jealousy of Cain is a little bit understood. Like we're both half of the world, but he gets to live in that beautiful, world, and I'm here dealing with thorns and sweat and all the problems that the toil, and it's, I understand the appeal of Abel, of Cain's world, but on the other hand, in this week's Torah portion, we understand the jealousy the other way, right? In this week's portion, we know the Jews live in the desert, and they lived on this spiritual food from heaven, the manna that fell from heaven, and all they want is meat, and they're complaining to God, we don't want this lechem haklokel, this light bread of nothingness. They don't want that world of spiritual. They want to be the masters of their own world. They want to be the creators. They remember the food they ate in Egypt with toil. They were slaves in Egypt. How can you be nostalgic and sentimental about the food of Egypt as opposed to the gift of man? So in a way, Cain can be jealous of Abel, and Abel's jealous of Cain. That's the story of history. Also, both two sides. It takes two to tangle. It's never one who's guilty and one right. Okay. Let's do the red heifer. So the Torah tells us in the beginning of Parshas Chukas, Zois Chukas HaTorah. This is the chok, the chiseling of all chiselings. Then what is the law? You have to take for yourself a red heifer. You bring all this is in the context of impurity that comes from death. If you come in contact with death or loss of life, so the way there's a certain impurity that comes, however you understand it, we'll talk about it a little bit maybe, but when you come in contact with the death or loss of life, then you need something. This is you become tummy, and the thing that restores your tumah, your impurity, is the ashes of the red heifer. Let's discover what these ashes of the red heifer are. If you find amongst your you'll find you have this red heifer grown in your flocks. It's a pure, perfect, unblemished red child baby cow. Asher ein bamum, there's not a flaw on it. Asher loy olo ele oil, it never wore a yoke. It never worked a day in its life. It never carried anything. The Talmud is very elaborate. Nothing. It couldn't have anything on its back. It could have never borne a burden. Okay, you know what? I'll tell you the story. Basically, you take this red heifer, this perfect, pristine red heifer, and you burn it. It's oira, that's besara, you burn the entire thing. Most sacrifices and offerings in the temple were primarily eaten by the Kohen. There were different ones, the different parts, but really a typical offering would have been eaten. Some of it, certain fats went on the altar, but the Kohen got a certain part of the thing to eat, and the owners got to eat a lot of the food. They had a holy meal, a meal of a cow that went on the altar. It was called shlumin. It's complete because everybody benefited. This is the other extreme. Nothing was used. The entire thing is burnt. Al pirsha yirsoif. The entire thing burned in front of the eye, right? Le'enov, it's oirav, it's besara, it's skin, it's flesh, it's blood. Everything is put on the altar. What's the story? So I think this is the image. What is the imagery? What is the Torah trying to convey by letting us know this baby cow? That is pristine and perfect and never wore a par. This par. So this is the image of unbridled youth. It's, I say this all the time. Like in any house, the first people up in the morning are the little kids. They're bouncing off the walls. They're fully alive, and they're on fire. We call it wide-eyed. They live wide-eyed, excited, curious. That's the way life is supposed to be. That's the healthiest thing. That's completion. And what happens is that life comes, and we start to get knocked around, and there are negative experiences, and our coach yells at us in Little League. Someone doesn't want to sit with us in the dining room in school, whatever. We know all the stereotypical stories. And we start to get chipped away at, and we lose part of our dreams, and we start to, everybody starts off, every girl wants to be a princess, and every boy wants to be the hero, the knight in shining armor that slays the dragon and deserves the princess. Well, maybe there are more modern princess, hero, and heroine ideas, but we all start off wanting to be significant, right? We want to be great. And then life comes and knocks us around. That's called the chiseling. We are made by chakika. We're chiseled. I'll explain to you like this. People ask the question. It's a deep question. It deserves time to explain. I'm going to say it in short. If you don't get it, it's not. If I don't convey it well enough, just ignore it. It's not that important. The answer is what's important. We say God is one. Hashem is echad, and we're all created in God's image. So if we're all created in God's image and God is one, so then why aren't we all the same? How many images does God have? And one means he doesn't have parts. So you can't say it's all parts of God. I'm this part, he's that. God is unity. He's oneness itself. So he's not complex. So then how are we all different? That's an interesting question. So the answer is, one of the ways to understand it is, when you come to Mount Rushmore, so you see all the presidents in Mount Rushmore. Which president was in Mount Rushmore before it was chiseled? Before the chakika, before the chiseling? Who was in there? And the answer is every president. Before they made it, it could have been anyone. The artist had to choose what he was going to remove to create the presidents he did. Jefferson, Washington, Lincoln. This is what he had to do. What he had to do was a choice of what to remove. So this is how we understand the uniqueness of human beings. I'm going to explain a little more because I'm going to leave you with a little bit something sad if I don't go the distance. The idea is that we all start off as a block of granite. That's when we're all the image of God. God is perfection. We all start off as that. The reason why we're all unique is not because there are different aspects to God or God is multiple things. It's because what makes me unique is what was chiseled off of me. How we were chiseled, exactly like Mount Rushmore. I'm not different because my essence is different. We all started off as a block of granite. I'm different because I had unique trauma and you had different trauma. Life came and chiseled this chunk off you and this chunk off me. I'm formed by my trauma. And that's our uniqueness. Our uniqueness is how we were beaten and how all of our pains and our sufferings and how we recoiled from our dreams and our thoughts. We are products of being chiseled, and that's how we're made. There's something that's beautiful about this in the sense that all of our pain was significant in that it wasn't ruining us, that's what made us. We're being formed by the chiseled. We're being carved, and we're the artwork. But there is something sad about it, and what's sad is that, the block of granite weighs less now. A lot of me was left on the shop floor. What I could have been. Why did I have to lose all those parts of me? So this metaphor is not really the metaphor we use for understanding how people are made. It's a step along the way. Because it's not true. God is a far greater artist. He doesn't need... Nothing's lost. What is the metaphor in the Torah we use for the formation of a child, for the educational process of a child? That's from the menorah. We call it Chanukas HaMenorah, the education, chinuch, the forming of the menorah. And its dedication is the same word as education. We learn raising children from the menorah, forming people, educating them, training them. How is the menorah made? The menorah is something called miksha. It's a solid block of gold that had to be beaten into shape. You knocked it, and it was beaten, and constantly beating it till it starts to take the shape, a complex shape with cups and a briach and a kaftar and a ferach, flowers, bolts, cups, and then branches. Very complex, beautiful. The menorah was complex and beautiful, but it was made starting from a block of stone, knocking it into gold has a softness to it, and you're able to beat it into shape. So when something is miksha and it's made by beating it, so what's going on? If you think about it, it's also being shaped by trauma. It has the same beauty of concept that you have in Mount Rushmore, in a block of stone being chiseled. Chiseling out is the final product is shaped by trauma, and the menorah and banging it, it's also shaped. But the difference is, in the menorah, nothing is lost. There is nothing chiseled off. Every time I knock it here, that gold pops out over here. I'm not denting this. I'm creating a flower. I'm creating a cup and a bolt. The menorah is so deep. It's shaped by pain and shaped by life, but nothing's lost. It weighs the exact same amount when it's done than when it started. That's how chinuch needs to be, and that's a tall order, and that's what it means in Torah when it says that nobody knew how to build. They couldn't build. Moshe, even Bezalel couldn't make the menorah. It had to be made magically by God putting it into a fire, and it popped out complete. The science of the ability to shape somebody without leaving anything on the ground, without any loss of personality and character, the true chinuch is the Jewish aspiration. but it's our struggle to get there. That's what we're attempting to do. Okay, so let's get back to the Parah Aduma. So it was worth, whatever. I think it's a beautiful idea to think about. The Parah Aduma, the red heifer, is the symbol of the most vibrant, fully alive. It's red. Red is wild and untamed in a good way. That's what a child. You don't want to see a kid walking, all meek and broken. It's good when the kid doesn't want to come in from recess so far, and the teacher has to blow the whistle a few times. One more shot. He's vibrant. He's alive. That's a good sign. We don't want to break them. So the Torah is like, look what it's doing. It's painting a picture of total aspiration. Alive, red, never wore a yoke, unblemished, not a scratch, not a scar, never worked. You're picturing this thing with wide eyes, innocent, alive. And what do you do? And as soon as you get that picture, and you're sort of looking at, with hope, this picture of youth and freshness and ambition, and you settle in on this poetic image. You know what Torah says? You take that, and you burn it. Es oira, ves besara. You reduce it to nothing, to ashes. You take totality. This is the saddest image in the entire Torah. It is an image of totality, completion, reduced to zero, 100 to zero. Zos chukas haTorah. This is the chiseling of the Torah. Nothing in the world was chiseled like this is chiseled. It went from everything to nothing in moments. The ashes of the Parah Aduma are the saddest thing in the universe. The saddest thing in the universe. And when people are broken, anyone who's sad and experienced loss and death, you take it and you sprinkle the ashes of the Parah Aduma on them. It's a whole new law now. But why would that work? What is the idea of the sprinkling of the ashes? So before we figure it out, let's make sure we have this clear. The Parah Aduma is meant to be an image. It's the chok. It's the chiseling of all chiseling. How is this inspiring to anyone? What is the inspiration of it? How does this help us? How is this supposed to inspire or rekindle something in the person who's experienced loss and is broken? So there are a number of ways to understand it. I'm not going to force it into any one of those angles. I'll give you the basic way to understand it, and you can find your own niche of all different ways that this manifests itself as a cure for the sense of loss. The disillusionment or the loss of death, the feeling of loss, it weighs you down. It's a chunk of you is removed, and it's lonely. It's the whole. You feel something taken out of you, and the Parah Aduma becomes like the overlay, the totality of all loss. And the Torah is saying to come with your package of suffering and pain, and put it against the backdrop of the red heifer. Look at it in the context of all of pain. Your pain is a subset of the totality of pain. There is a totality of loss, and each one of us bears a piece of that. So it's inspiring and helps in a number of ways. It's feeling that this has been addressed. It's understood. This isn't a mistake. I'm part of a larger plan. The Parah Aduma is it's sort of like when you have a stamp album with all the stamps of whatever country it is that you're collecting, and one by one you collect them and you put those stamps into the book. The book is the backdrop of totality, and this is you are here. It puts you in perspective. On the other hand, it pales your pain. Your pain becomes bearable and acceptable against the backdrop of the Parah Aduma. It's a feeling of being understood. It's a feeling of your pain being conceptualized in the larger picture. And it's the picture of understanding in the larger picture, that it's significant, your pain, but against the backdrop of the total pain of the Parah Aduma, it pales in comparison. It allows you to see the vast stretches of life that are yours and that are available to you that the Parah Aduma didn't have. It rekindles the hope in showing how your pain, which occupies such a large place in your mind, but the Parah Aduma is reframing it, a larger worldview where your pain is tiny, not minimized, but put honestly in the picture of all loss. Everyone's pain against the backdrop of the Parah Aduma. Everyone's pain is a small subset, no matter what you've been through. You didn't start at 100 and you weren't reduced to 0. So whatever loss of yours, whether you went from 78 to 73, from more likely from 78.111 to 78.119, right? That loss against the enormity of the paraduma is it creates hope. It creates a picture of what you do have and what you can have. What you can focus on what you lost, but against the backdrop of what remains and what is, it inspires you to regain life and not to give up and not to lie on the floor, wallowing in pity and self-pity and suffering, but to realize that there's the vast stretches of the universe are still open to me. But what happens is, this is the great irony of the paraduma. When you sprinkle the ashes of the paraduma, it rekindles, it brings the person who had lost back to vibrancy. But the halaw is the person who does the sprinkling, he becomes impure. It's like a trade. Well, the sprinkler can sprinkle a lot of people, so he recovers all of them, and only he remains impure. But it's matame tameim, matare tahirim, matame tameim. It purifies the impure, and it makes the pure impure. It makes the impure pure and the pure impure, because the people who are innocent and live, looking at that sense of loss of the paraduma, has to be the most depressing thing in the world. If you're starting at 100, the idea of loss is devastating. But if you're coming from a state of loss, then all you're seeing is what is. It has this effect on both. And that's one of the great secrets of the paraduma, the Torah's understanding of how, what the Torah's program is. Again, the Torah's program is only that we should be dancing in Hashem's garden. God doesn't need us to bow before Him. We need to accept Him and to believe in Him and to serve Him, so that we will feel safe enough and confident enough in the value of the world. When you believe in God, then you know it's a garden, and then you can dance in the garden. You can be all in, and you can pursue truth and love and knowledge and wealth and success and beauty, and because you know it's beautiful. And that's the struggle. Most people are hiding in the garden, and the entirety of the Torah is how do I get man out of the bushes back dancing in the garden, in the garden. And the paraduma is one of the. Again, you understand now why we see these laws as so central. They don't have matter meaning, but what they do for our mindset. Both these are good contrasts, because the first law was an intellectual insight, and the second, that we see the paraduma more as an emotional, dealing with emotional things. One is idealism. Realism is a philosophical, it's a breakthrough philosophically that the law of wool and linen is providing us, while the law of the red heifer is providing us a great insight emotionally. That's the red heifer. Okay, I think we'll do one more. Let's do the payas. We'll do the side locks. Right? Okay. The law of payas. So here we have a little supplemental information that you probably have heard or you didn't hear. I'll let you know. There's two different laws in the Torah called payah. The translation of the word payah in Hebrew means corner, and the law of growing payah says you're not allowed to lo sechale. You cannot obliterate the side, the payos of your face, the corners of your face. The corners are whatever. We don't have to get into. There are different corners. So you can't use a razor on them. There's actually no biblical requirement to grow long, dangly side locks. But this is what we do as religious Jews. We seek, definitely the Hasidim, they seek to. The Torah gives a certain measure of guidance. Let's go to town on it. How many things did God say already? Whatever He told us is a good thing to do. Let's do it in spades. So the Torah tells you're not allowed to shave off with a razor the corner. You can't obliterate the corners of your hair. So we leave it. According to halacha, it has to be different amounts, but at least enough to grab it. That's the smallest opinion. That's not called obliterate. If you can grab hold of it, that would be the minimum. But there are other opinions, but there's no limit going on the top side. The Torah says the side locks are good. The more good, the better. Another The other law is the corner of your field. We just had, if you studied the scroll of Ruth on Shavuot, that's what we read on Shavuot. It takes place in the wheat harvest, and they were poor. They came and they went to the field of Boaz, and there are different things that the poor people are entitled to take in the field. One is any sheaves that are dropped, if it's not a threshold of a certain amount, or something that the sickle missed. Leket and shikha and payah, three things. If the guy drops, the harvesters drop, a few stray pieces, you have to leave them. You can't gather every piece. You have to leave it for poor people. The poor people are entitled to follow after the harvesters, the reapers, and take what fell. Also, if your sickle missed some stuff, you can't go back and get every last thing. If it missed one or two stalks, then the poor people can go take that too. And finally, you have to leave a corner of your field. Which is interesting because it's the exact same law as the corner of your hair, because it doesn't give a top side. It just says you can't harvest the whole corner. But technically you can leave a stalk in the corner. I didn't harvest the corner. Or I can really call up to 50%, right, the diagonal of your field, up to that could be called corner. A field can be essentially just corners, and you see, you can really, corner is according to halacha, you can leave as much of your corner, I'll just say this, it would be a nice thought if people would leave as much to charity, it's a lot easier to grow long sidelocks than to exaggerate my charitable gift and give that much corner. We should be consistent. I'm not saying if you know what, if you can do any law, do any law, but it would be really cool if if we could exaggerate the corner of our fields to such a large degree too, and take care of people. Okay. Now, to make a pattern, you need three. Three establishes in Judaism called the chazaka. You have a real thing going there is a third law in the Torah of corners, and that is the corners of your garments should have tzitzis, right? The fringes that we wear in the corners of our garments. So now, what I want to work on is the idea that there are three. The Torah has some interesting requirements when it comes to corners. The corner of your face, you're not allowed to harvest. The corner of your field, you're not allowed to totally harvest. You have to have stuff growing. You have to have things on the corner of your field growing. You can't razor it. On your face, you can't razor it. Got to be something growing. And the corner of your garments, you have to attach. You have to attach strings on the corner of your garments. It seems like the Torah has a preference, a requirement, that there has to be stuff dangling off the corners of your garments, or off all corners, whether it's your field, your face, or your clothing, all the arenas of life, all the gates of your life. They're all called gates. In fact, some people would ask, it doesn't sound the same. Those are growing. You're attaching knots on you're attaching the strings. It's not organic. It's not coming from the clothing. Well, clothing doesn't grow. But ironically, just in case anybody had that thought that it's not a legitimate connection, the word the Torah uses for both hair and tzitzis is gedilim, growing. Lagadel is to grow, to become bigger. But in growing, it's gedilim taslecha. You should attach growing strings on your garments. They're called gedilim. And by the Nazir, whose hair has to grow, gadel pere sa'ar roishchem. His hair, he should cause to growth. His hair should continue to grow. Also called, it's the hair, the gates, we'll see. It's going to be significant, what hair, gates, why it's the same word in Hebrew, sha'ar, right, sa'ar. The idea is as follows. Well, I don't know if I want to go that fast. It's a punchline, and you have to create a little bit of a drum roll. So we have a pattern, and the little more information is that all these things have come to be signs of Judaism. The Hasidim grow to pay it because it's sort of like a sign. This is how a Jew looks. This is a sign of a Jew. And the Torah actually says it straight out by tzitzis. The purpose of the mitzvah of tzitzis is ureisa mosa. We say it in the Shema. You should see them and remember the entire Torah. Somehow tzitzis are supposed to be a reminder of all of Judaism. That's what we wear them. We wear these strings. You look at a guy and you see his payas. Oh, he's a Jew. And the Jew looks at his tzitzis and goes, oh, Torah, the whole Judaism. How does it remind? In the corner of a field, this is a Jewish field. Why are these the signs of Judaism? So to understand this, we have to really understand what is a corner. What is the imagery? What is Hashem conveying? Hashem is talking about corners. So I'm going to give you two explanations. Till now, I gave you hukum, intellectual ones, the shatnez, and an emotional one, emotional insight in the red heifer. But I want to show you that I'm just scratching the surface. The Torah tells us there are 70 faces to the Torah. So just to show that, here I'll give you both. I'll show you in this case, because it's shorter, I'll show you an emotional and an intellectual understanding of this. So first we'll do the intellectual one first. That, you know what a corner is? Not so simple. Corner is two different things. If we see the world as we see it, that Hashem is echad, God is one, and then the world is the fragment, the hiddenness of God's unity, fragments. Like I've said in previous classes, whether you were here or not, is that we like to think of Hashem and the world as like the cover of the puzzle box in the puzzle. Hashem echad, God is oneness, God is the cover of the puzzle box. And then he hid his unity. That's the universe. The universe is not distinct. The universe is God with the unity hidden. So if God's the cover of the box, the universe is the puzzle. Hundreds, millions of trillions of pieces of cardboard, colorful cardboard. And it's our job to realize that this isn't random cardboard. This is a picture. And can we assemble it and recreate the cover of the box? Which would bring us to the third stage. Stage 1 is the cover of the box. Stage 2 is the random pieces. Stage 3 is where we make the puzzle. We create the unity and we experience God, but through our own hands. And that's the beauty of stage 3. See, no one in the world ever hung the cover of the puzzle box on their wall. That's not neat. Milton Bradley made that. Parker Brothers. I'm dating myself. I don't know what the companies are today. So it's a long time since I've done a puzzle. But you have a cover, and then you have pieces, and then you have the assembled pieces. The third stage and the first stage are identical. Just the difference is me. The first stage is the manufacturer, the picture, the photographer. The third stage is us. We get to experience the perfection, godliness, but not as beggars, not as a handout, as the creators of that oneness. We are the reassembled. That's called bimamlech Hashem, making God king, restoring. We say it in Olenu, Bayom Ahu Yeh Hashem Echad Ushemo Echad. Right? God will be one, and His name will be one. Hashem is one. God is one. Is the cover of the box. His name is one. Is that how we'll be perceived? Is that here we'll make the puzzle to match Him? It'll be the same up there. And down here the same. We're mirroring we're assembling the pieces to mirror the unity of God as He really is in our own universe, and that'll be the joy of our lives. Is the symphony, right? It's a different metaphor than puzzle, but the symphony of all the parts and all the pieces combined. That said, so all of Judaism can be summed up as the pursuit of oneness. The assembly of the pieces, we put the world together. That's what Judaism is. Judaism is we're the puzzle makers. That's the Jewish people, the conductor of the universe. We're not all the pieces, but we're the puzzle maker. That said, so where does that struggle of life take place? So that's what a corner is. There are two ways to see a corner. When you see a corner can be either the boundary, the limits, the edges, the perimeter. That's how people think of corners. I would say defying corners. It's where you end. It's the extreme borders of your existence, the perimeter, boundaries. That's what a corner would be. That's a very, very non-Jewish understanding of corner. If you would have said that, you don't know, you didn't say it out loud, so you got away with it. But that's not Jewish. You have work to do. What a Jew would say, you know what a corner is another way to see a corner. If we believe that everything in the world is one, then a corner is not a boundary, a perimeter. A corner is a junction. A corner is where things connect. A corner is the forefront of unity. If all the pieces are really one, then the corner is not where I end. The corner is where we meet. There's the most extreme understandings of the exact same word and the exact same thing. What is a corner? Is a corner your end, your boundary, your perimeter, or is a corner your junction, your meeting place, your place of union? And that is the greatest difference in the world. It is forbidden to have flush corners. A flush corner, smooth, precise corner says islands. A world of trillions, a random world of islands. Colorful pieces of cardboard. The sign of a Jew, how do we proclaim the same way we proclaim Shema Yisrael, Hashem is one? Well, we proclaim that with our entire existence. Every one of your ends has to project beyond your end. You need to have tzitzis, projections, growth. We expand beyond its couplings. That's what it is. Tzitzis, peya of the field in the face. The sign of a Jew is that you don't end flush. A flush line says that we're islands. Extensions on your corners means we reach out to each other from the corners. I went on a trip with college students, an outreach trip. I was giving classes. We went to South Africa, and we did the safari in Kruger, and I had the privilege to see a chain of elephants, and the way they walk is trunk to tail. Every tail is grabbing the trunk behind it, and it's this magnificent chain of parents and children, all like holding on, coupled, their trunks holding. And I had this image at that moment of that should be our universe, and that's our image of like tzitzis. Tzitzis say grab hold here and grab hold here. We're one big chain. I'm not an island. I'm a coupling. I'm a middle car in the train. This catches the car in front of me, and this is the car behind me, and we're one big circle. And that's what tzitzis proclaim, and that's the corners of your field proclaim. And it's not just a proclamation like that, not just a theoretical symbolic thing, but definitely in the case of the field, it's exactly what it's doing. It's a place where the poor can connect to you, where there are no walls, there are no perimeters, no borders. That's the philosophical approach. I'll end this with the last idea, is the emotional approach, and then we'll continue part 3 later. So what's the other approach to tzitzis and payas? This other approach, the emotional approach, deals with the exact same phenomena. We have 3 different laws in the Torah that seem to address corners. They're laws of corners. You can't keep the corner flush. You can't, whether it's on your face or your field or your garments. And I think what the message is that again, we start off vibrant and alive, and then stuff happens, and we think our lives are limited. I think I'm capped. I think I'm never going to be able to achieve what I want. I've fallen. I've crashed. We reach our boundaries or our perimeters. We come to our borders, and that the experience of that is something called yish. Yish is what the struggle of life is. Really a struggle, I call this, between dreams and yish. Longing, yearning. We want to live. We want to be vibrant, and the idea of I want to curl up in a little ball and give up. I just want to be numb. I want to stop. Dreams are painful. I've reached the end. It's never going to happen for me. Who am I fooling? And then my dreams become my enemies because they cause me pain, thinking about what I once believed. And then we have to start lying to ourselves. Not only do we stop, longing for the things we long for, but even that longing itself now causes me pain. So I have to start to change my whole ideology. I have to stop caring about what I care about. I have to convince myself that a whole new type of thing is what I crave and what I want, and that I'm living things that aren't true, and that I really can't. What happens? Like life just snowballs. Because first I stop living my dreams, and then I have to change my dreams, because you can't stop doing something that you long for if it's never going to happen. That's painful. So now I change my ideology. But you can't really lie to yourself. When you're around other people and they all laugh with you, so then you can feel like it. But when you go home and they're gone, then you know your truth. So then that takes you to terrible places. Then you have to drown out your thoughts, and you have to live an entire life. This is what happens. This is how life gets derailed. And Judaism, this is why people are, again, my metaphor, curled up in the bushes in the Garden of Eden, when we should be dancing in the garden. This is God's beautiful world. Life is full of blessing and it's designed for success. The problem is that we stopped approaching life, or we approach it so tentatively and so reluctantly that failure is assured. You're not guaranteed to succeed. You're guaranteed to success isn't guaranteed. You are guaranteed to succeed, but you have to be you. If you're not bringing you to the party, then if you're going to be a fraction of you is not guaranteed success. You are an instrument in the symphony, not one little fragment of you. The blessings come to you when you live the life that you were meant to live. But instead, we're all curled up in a fetal position with noise-canceling headphones on. So this is the most important thing. The world is broken and hiding, and the Jewish people's message to the world is we're carrying God's message. The message is to dance in Hashem's garden. So what is the sign? How does it look to be the messenger to dance in Hashem's garden? The voice of the message is don't give up. There's no, you're not in the end. You're just getting started. Like, there's hope. Try again. Keep on going. That's the message of the Jewish people. And no one's been beaten more than us or experienced, but we're still going. What is the visual of that? The visual of that, what screams out all of Judaism is that there's no such thing as a corner. Whenever you reach a corner, wherever you reach a perimeter, that's where we start. A flush corner is giving up. Corners are not ends. Corners are launching pads. That's a sign of tzitzis and payas. Payas scream out hope. Payas scream out as you're about to give up. No, there's no corner. This is where you start. Everything, the corner is just where the roots are. Look what's growing off the corners. You're just getting started. Go live the optimism and the vibrancy. Look at your clothing. The corners. The sign of a Jew is projection beyond your corners. There are no corners. You're not boxed in. You haven't reached the end of your line. If your line begins where you thought you end. That's where we begin. And that is Judaism. Our payas is a sign of a Jew. Our tzitzis are a sign of a Jew. The next time you go outside and you see payas and tzitzis, let it kindle in you a little fire. That what I thought was my end, what I thought was the time to start writing things off, is just the fertile ground for me planting my next stage. It's the future is created on the projections, the tzitzis. These are the holiest mitzvahs. Their foundation is built on the ashes of the past. Like we say in L'Chadodi that Nivnasa ir al tila, the city will be built on the ruins of the previous city, and it'll be higher and taller. And we've seen it time and again. The only thing that can stop us is to give up. And that would be the saddest thing. So this is an introduction to the world of hukum. So sad for people to think that Hashem the benevolent, gracious, giving God, the source of all kindness and love and giving, that would give us laws that we could just suppress your thought and suppress your mind, just swallow it and just do it. No, the hukum are the most integral understandings of things in the entire Torah. And in a way, it's a little bit of a benefit that their message is not clouded or distracted from by practical laws, with things we have, behaviors and time schedules and things that we have to do. They're chiseled into reality without the physical reality, so that we could just focus on the ideas and not be bogged down by the constraining limitations of practicality. Although, we do have to live in practicality, which gets to the heart of the argument, like we said, of Cain and Abel. Practicality is real, but it's good to sometimes read some writing that was chiseled into the world and has truth not limited or defined by physical existence. All right, I just feel like this should end with a bracha. Everybody should find this second wind and grab hold of their own payas and their own tzitzis and project beyond their corners. This entire time that we're sitting here, for many people, it's a corner, trapped in the corner in quarantine. Quarantine is probably a good definition of staying within your corners. But I think what people have discovered is through Zoom, that we found things outside of our corners that we never would have had if we wouldn't have been in our corners. sometimes the corner is what gives birth to the tzitzis and the payas. And may you grab on to all these growths that you found in the course of this time living in the corner. Huddled in the corner, we found the infinite. And, all right. If you want, I can pick you up a pair of tzitzis and mail it to you if you're anywhere not local. All right. We'll see you next time. Take care.